yet it makes no wet. It is of great weight, and is small. Philalethes says in A Brief Guide to the Celestial Ruby, "The philosopher's stone is a certain heavenly, spiritual, penetrative, and fixed substance, which brings all metals to the perfection of gold or silver, according to the quality of the medicine, and that by natural methods, which yet in their effects transcend nature. Know then that it is called a stone, not because it is like a stone, but only because by virtue of its fixed nature it resists the action of fire as successfully as any stone. In species it is gold, more pure than the purest. It is fixed and incombustible like a stone, but its appearance is that of very fine powder, impalpable to the touch, sweet to the taste, fragrant to the smell, in potency a most penetrative spirit, apparently dry and yet unctuous, and easily capable of tinging a plate of metal. If we say that its nature is spiritual, it would be no more than the truth. If we described it as corporeal, the expression would be equally correct." The same author says, "There is a substance of a metalline species, which looks so cloudy that the universe will have nothing to do with it. Its visible form is vile. It defiles metalline bodies, and no one can readily imagine that the pearly drink of bright Phoebus should spring from thence. Its components are a most pure and tender mercury, a dry incarcerate sulphur, which binds it and restrains fluxation. Know this subject, it is the sure basis of all our secrets. To deal plainly, it is the child of Saturn, of mean price and great venom. It is not malleable, though metalline. Its colour is sable, with intermixed argent, which mark the sable fields with veins of glittering argent." In trying to attach definite meanings to the alchemical accounts of principles, elements, and the one thing, and the directions which the alchemists give for changing one substance into others, we are very apt to be misled by the use of such expressions as the transmutation of the elements. To a chemist that phrase means the change of an element into another element, an element being a definite substance, which no one has been able to produce by the combination of two or more substances unlike itself, or to separate into two or more substances unlike itself. But whatever may have been the alchemical meaning of the word element, it was certainly not that given to the same word today, nor did the word transmutation mean to the alchemist what it means to the chemist. The facts which are known at present concerning the elements make unthinkable such a change as that of lead into silver, but new facts may be discovered which will make possible the separation of lead into things unlike itself, and the production of silver by the combination of some of these constituents of lead. The alchemist supposed he knew such facts as enabled him not only to form a mental picture of the change of lead into silver, or tin into gold, but also to assert that such changes must necessarily happen, and to accomplish them. Although we are quite sure that the alchemist's facts were only imaginings, we ought not to blame him for his reasoning on what he took to be facts. Every metal is now said to be an element in the modern meaning of that word. The alchemist regarded the metals as composite substances, but he also thought of them as more simple than many other things. Hence, if he was able to transmute one metal into another, he would have strong evidence in support of his general conception of the unity of all things. And as transmutation meant to the alchemist the bringing of a substance to the condition of greatest perfection possible for that substance, his view of the unity of nature might be said to be proved if he succeeded in changing one of the metals, one of these comparatively simple substances, into the most perfect of all metals, that is, into gold. The transmutation of the baser metals into gold thus came to be the practical test of the justness of the alchemical scheme of things. Some alchemists assert they had themselves performed the great transmutation. Others tell of people who had accomplished the work. The following story is an example of the accounts given of the making of gold. It is taken from John Frederick Helvetius's Golden Calf, which the world worships and adores, from the 17th century. On the 27th of December, 1666, in the forenoon, there came to my house a certain man who was a complete stranger to me, but of an honest, grave countenance, and an authoritative mien. clothed in a simple garb. He was of middle height. His face was long and slightly pock-marked. His hair was black and straight, his chin close shaven, his age about 43 or 44, and his native province, as far as I could make out, North Holland. After we had exchanged salutations, he asked me whether he might have some conversation with me. He wished to say something to me about the pyrotechnic art, as he had read one of my tracts, directed against the sympathetic powder of Dr. Digby, in which I hinted a suspicion whether the great arcanum of the sages was not after all a gigantic hoax. He therefore took that opportunity of asking me whether I could not believe that such a grand mystery might exist in the nature of things, by means of which a physician could restore any patient whose vitals were not irreparably destroyed. I answered, such a medicine would be a most desirable acquisition for any physician, nor can any man tell how many secrets there may be hidden in nature. Yet, though I have read much about the truth of this art, it has never been my good fortune to meet with a real master of the alchemical science. After some further conversation, the artist Elias, for it was he, thus addressed me: "Since you have read so much in the works of the alchemists about this stone, its substance, its colour, and its wonderful effects, may I be allowed the question whether you have not prepared it yourself?" On my answering his question in the negative, he took out of his bag a cunningly worked ivory box, in which were 3 large pieces of substance resembling glass, or pale sulphur, and informed me that here was enough of the tincture for the production of 20 tons of gold. When I had held the precious treasure in my hand for a quarter of an hour, during which time I listened to a recital of its wonderful curative properties, I was compelled to restore it to its owner, which I could not help doing with a certain degree of reluctance. My request that he would give me a piece of his stone, though it were no larger than a coriander seed, he somewhat brusquely refused, adding in a milder tone that he could not give it me for all the wealth I possessed, and that not on account of its great preciousness, but for some other reason which it was not lawful for him to divulge. Then he inquired whether I could not show him into a room at the back of the house, where we should be less liable to the observation of passers-by. On my conducting him into the state parlour, which he entered without wiping his dirty boots, he demanded of me a gold coin, and while I was looking for it, he produced from his breast pocket a green silk handkerchief, in which were folded up 5 medals, the gold of which was infinitely superior to that of my gold piece. Here follows the inscription on the medals. I was filled with admiration, and asked my visitor whence he had obtained that wonderful knowledge of the whole world. He replied that it was a gift freely bestowed on him by a friend who had stayed a few days at his house. Here follows the stranger's account of this friend's experiments. When my strange visitor had concluded his narrative, I besought him to give me a proof of his assertion by performing the transmutatory operation on some metals in my presence. He answered evasively that he could not do so then, but that he would return in 3 weeks, and that if he was then at liberty to do so, he would show me something that would make me open my eyes. He appeared punctually to the promised day, and invited me to take a walk with him, in the course of which we discoursed profoundly on the secrets of nature in fire, though I noticed that my companion was very chary in imparting information about the grand arcanum. At last I asked him point blank to show me the transmutation of metals. I besought him to come and dine with me, and to spend the night at my house. I entreated, I expostulated, but in vain. He remained firm. I reminded him of his promise. He retorted that his promise had been conditional upon his being permitted to reveal the secret to me. At last, however, I prevailed upon him to give me a piece of his precious stone, a piece no larger than a grain of rapeseed. He bid me take half an ounce of lead and melt it in the crucible, for the medicine would certainly not tinge more of the base metal than it was sufficient for. He promised to return at 9 o'clock the next morning, but at the stated hour on the following day he did not make his appearance. In his stead, however, there came a few hours later a stranger, who told me that his friend the artist was unavoidably detained, but that he would call at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The afternoon came. I waited for him till 7:30 o'clock. He did not appear. Thereupon my wife came and tempted me to try the transmutation myself. I determined, however, to wait till the morrow. On the morrow I asked my wife to put the tincture in wax, and I myself prepared 6 drachms of lead. I then cast the tincture